Hi, I'm Bob Davis from picNiche.com and picWorkflow.com. I gave a presentation recently at Stock in Russia for Press Photo in Moscow, and I wanted to bring that same presentation to Microstock photographers on the web. So I put together a series of short videos to discuss the Microstock marketplace and how to maximize your earning potential now that Microstock has matured within the broader stock photography industry. I'll start with a short introduction on who I am. I'm a Microstock photographer and illustrator, but primarily illustrations. I have a reasonably small portfolio of about 2,000 to 2,500 images, spread over about 10 agencies, and mostly produced around 3 years ago. It was about 2008 to 2009. I'm not a particularly good illustrator or photographer, but I enjoy Microstock. I enjoy creating interesting pieces and generally go for niche topics, which is why I built picNiche.com in the first place. Isolated items, all those kind of unusual shots you don't find very often. What I mainly work with is software, browser add-ons, websites, applications, WordPress, various websites that I run mainly for generating referral income or for driving traffic to photographers' images. Those of you who do use the picNiche Microstock contributors toolbar may have read the blog or used it to track your earnings, generate keywords, announce new images. There's a variety of tools in both toolbars for contributors and for image buyers. And my Microstock philosophy is to view the industry pragmatically and to not get bogged down in the emotion, and then to act rationally based upon how the environment or the industry really is, and then in response to that to act responsibly, to try and work for the greater good of photographers, to kind of identify areas where everyone can benefit rather than going for that all-out competitive edge or anything like that. In this presentation, over 4 or 5 parts, the goals I'm looking at are to view the Microstock industry as raw data, give an overview of how that's developed over the last few years, and to help you find your place in the Microstock industry, and to give some pointers on how to develop your portfolio content, change or improve your workflow, and improve reach, your access to image buyers. So in part 1 I'll address the Microstock industry and how it's matured over the last few years. Microstock was pretty much invented by iStock Photo around 2001-2002. There were a lot of agencies that came along later, but initially there were maybe 3 or 4 agencies recognizing the potential of dollar pricing for stock photography online, with crowdsourcing and online distribution. That was when there was the first smell of a long tail in the market. This was at the same point that the rest of the internet was really recognizing what a long tail actually means, as things like online advertising developed. From 2005 to about 2009, the Microstock market developed there were a lot more newcomers, both agencies and photographers, arriving, both amateurs and experienced professionals with varying levels of success. There were upward and downward price pressures from photographers demanding higher rates and image buyers demanding lower prices, and the attractiveness of low prices to newcomers to image purchase. So like the end consumer didn't really see what the benefit of purchasing an image was. The long tail then became even more apparent. Microstock began to understand that a long tail distribution in various aspects, as I'll demonstrate, can influence the market and can influence the way businesses, photographers and agencies operate. From 2009 there's quite a distinct maturation of the Microstock market. There are lots of competitors, both for photographers and agencies. There's buyouts, mergers and partnerships which lead to a consolidation of image libraries and of photographers' abilities and skills and collective reasoning. A premium micro content has been upsold to existing image buyers, so they're being sold on the macro model, and upselling has become the forefront of the Microstock marketing side. Reach, that is the access to image buyers, has opened up various niche markets as buyers are becoming more knowledgeable about image licensing and their requirements and responsibilities to online copyright and online access. Now though, the long tail has become very head heavy. That is a small number of individuals, both again agencies and photographers, as seeing the vast majority of the sales and providing the majority of the images. We can see the long tail in various places in the Microstock market, and this shows the approximate number of daily unique visitors to the top. I think that's 30 Microstock agencies. You can see a fairly clear long tail distribution, and if I included the hundreds of other Microstock agencies, you would see very much the same thing, with a tall head and a long low tail. If you include in that the Microstock and the free image libraries, so things like Flickr Commons or NASA Spaceflight Library, US National Park Service, various free image download websites, you see an incredibly high number of daily unique visitors to Flickr Commons, things like Wikipedia, even much higher than iStock and Shutterstock, which are quite high themselves. You see Flickr Commons receiving 300,000 approximate daily unique visitors, and iStock at somewhere around 50,000 daily unique visitors. Again, you can continue adding websites, agencies, libraries to this list, and it will only accentuate the long tail. If I take, for example, the portfolio sizes of photographers on iStock Photo, for accounts with at least one image, there are about 37,000 accounts. This chart shows the top 32,000, and it's a very clear long tail. You can see most of the images are located in the first 20 or so percent. When you break this down to the raw numbers, you find that 80% of iStock's images are from their top 6,600 photographers. That's 18% of photographers are providing 80% of the images. and half of all their images are from only 5% of photographers. If you take a look at the number of sales, you see very much the same pattern of this 32,000 of the 37,000 that iStock have photographers. Their downloads are again very head heavy. You see here it's even more accentuated. The 80% of iStock sales are by only 2,756 photographers. That's 7% of iStock's photographers make 80% of their sales. But more than that, half of all of iStock photographers half of all sales on iStock are by 1.6% or 600 of their photographers. That shows an incredibly head-heavy, and it shows that the higher performing photographers and those most likely to make a sale are really pulling the stops out to produce good quality saleable work, and in return iStock are most likely favouring them in their search algorithm to ensure that when an image buyer searches for, say, businessman, they're really seeing the cream of the crop and converting into a purchase immediately. Some agencies are doing this more than others, and it's one of those, it's a development that's going to carry on more and more as agencies realise that only the top 2 or 3% of their photographers will be providing the really good quality, saleable, high quality images. You get much the same view if you take a look at the number of downloads per image across the top 600 images for the top 10 photographers on any agency. You'll see that there's a long tail distribution, with the increasingly successful photographers seeing a larger, wider head, and therefore a slower dip into the tail. That means that a larger number of their images are selling more than their average number of times. And the more successful the photographer, the larger their head is. You don't really see a significant improvement in sales by uploading new images, but you do by increasing the head end of your sales distribution. You'll also see this in downloads per image for popular search terms. So we have here the top six of the more common searches. These are search terms sourced from one of my image search add-ons. But if you take the number of downloads per image and map that out for the top 400 images, you see the top few percent of images have the vast majority of the downloads. That would be page 1, page 2 of the search results. And you see there we've got the same result more or less from 2 different competing agencies. Again, you see this long tail distribution in search volumes. This is an approximate search volume of the top 600 search terms that I've received through stockphotofeeds.com. And this is used for feeds for search results for various add-ons that I have, and a couple of other people occasionally use it as a search API. So I have a fairly broad range of search data, which clearly shows that the top about 20% of search results make up about 80% of the searches. And the total number of searches that I currently have tracked is about 13,600 unique search terms. So like business and businessman and holiday and electrician are individually unique search phrases. But business is by far the most searched term. It's almost twice as searched than the next searched keyword, term, phrase. While I was looking at these various long tail charts and building the data for this presentation, I found that the Microstock agency library sizes don't really appear to show a long tail distribution. And partly this is understandable because of the number of independent photographers in the agency, those not exclusive to one Microstock agency. Mostly they'll submit to between 3 and 7 other agencies and make varying parts of their overall revenue from each of those agencies, which it makes sense you would have something of a bump in the distribution. But I wondered, is there still a long tail in here? So I took this agency library sizes, so we've got Shutterstock, Photolio, Dreamstime, Pixmac, all the way down to Stock Fuel and Photocar, and that shows anywhere from 16 million down to about 250,000. I then took some of the data from picWorkflow.com. This is my workflow tools for Microstock photographers, and took a look at which agencies they upload to and what volume of uploads is made to each agency. So you see very much a similar distribution in both of these charts. But if you take those two and compile them together, if you normalize the number of uploads made by photographers in any given time period, this is for all of 2011 to September, you see again a long tail distribution showing that photographers upload on the normal pattern for Microstock, for online business, for crowdsourced markets. This is what most people refer to as the 80-20 rule. This is what a long tail represents. It's the visualization of the 80-20 or the 70-30 rule. And by understanding this, you can realize that your position in the head or in the tail matters to how your photography business as a photographer or as an agency develops. There's no real average in a long tail distribution. You want to focus on your productive 80% of sales, of production, and the last 20% you want to minimize the amount of time you have to spend feeding that. This is much of the reason why, for example, iStock have made significant revisions to their photographers agreements over the last couple of years. Pretty much since they were purchased, they've followed these standard business rules of focusing on the suppliers that provide 80% of your revenue and pretty much disregarding the rest. More agencies, I expect, more Microstock agencies, will probably follow this route, particularly among the big 5 or the big 6, or whichever ones you want to count as the big players. That's kind of a normal business distribution. There's no average in this market. Agencies and photographers are probably best focused on whether they're in the head or whether they're in the tail. If you focus on the head, you want to be looking at doing one thing really, really, really well. And particularly, take business images, for example. This is something Yuriakos does really, really well. And he's essentially dominated that aspect of Microstock. He's probably taking home 60 to 70% of the sales just from a few simple tests that I've done in images that are purchased for common terms like businessman, businesswoman, a working team, successful, that kind of topic, is that there's a very small number of photographers really focusing and performing well on that head end. The tail is better if you work in, say, producing 20 images for 100 different niche topics. You're likely to see some success in the tail. So, if you know where you are, you can understand kind of how important as a photographer you are to the agencies, and as an agency, how important you are to photographers, and how likely they are to leave, for example, if you change your terms and conditions, or as a photographer, how likely an agency is to not necessarily accept or reject your work, because that's still a fairly equal system, but to understand how likely your work is to be promoted in search algorithms, or how likely it is to convert ultimately what your IPI is going to be, is partly down to whether you're in the head, whether you're in the tail, or whether you're in the last 20% that frankly nobody really cares about, because they don't produce a significant enough revenue stream to be spending that much time on. I'll pause there for part 2, and we'll talk about developing your portfolio in the next one.